On a cold city street, a mother sings with trembling hands, her sick daughter curled beside her, unnoticed by the world until one stranger stops and changes everything. What follows is a journey of love, music, and a miracle no one saw coming. This is a story you'll never forget, so stay with us till the end. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's jump into the story. On the corner of Maple Street, where coffee shops buzzed and buses groaned through intersections, a woman stood with a guitar case open and a child curled beside her. Nora Jensen held a microphone in one hand, and the other rested gently over her daughter's blanket. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, but Nora's voice shone brighter than anything around her. Cars passed with windows up. People walked by with earbuds in, their eyes drifting over the cardboard sign beside her feet that read, "My daughter needs a new heart. Please help." The words were scrawled in black marker, smudged from handling and maybe a few tears. The little girl beneath the blanket was Lila, only 6 years old, her cheeks pale, her breath shallow. Yet she held her mother's hand tightly, as if afraid it might float away. Nora's voice, though tired, carried a soft strength that turned a few heads. She sang an old lullaby, something she used to hum in her classroom before her job disappeared and her world narrowed down to hospitals, prescriptions, and sidewalk concerts. She didn't sing for applause. She sang because it was the only way she knew how to keep moving. From across the street, Dev Patel sat at a small cafe patio, stirring sugar into his tea that had already gone cold. His eyes were fixed on Nora. He didn't know her name, not yet, but something about her voice pulled at him. Like a thread tugging loose from a coat he thought he'd sewn shut long ago. He recognized the song. It was one his younger brother used to sing before he passed away. A song that hadn't entered Dev's life in over a decade. Dev hadn't planned to stop there. He'd meant to walk to the bookstore, maybe browse through titles he wouldn't buy, maybe escape from the silence in his apartment. But when he heard that voice, raw and pure, he stopped walking. He sat down. He listened. Nora took a deep breath between verses, her hand brushing Lila's hair as the girl stirred. "Almost done, sweetheart," she whispered. Lila gave a small nod and nestled in again. The guitar case in front of them held a few coins, a crumpled dollar and a small note that said, "God bless you." She sang again, her voice cracking slightly, but still she went on. Dev pulled his phone out of his coat pocket, opened the camera, then paused. He couldn't bring himself to record. It felt too personal, too real. This wasn't a performance, it was survival. Instead, he set the phone down and leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes never leaving them. A woman in a beige coat walked past and paused. Just briefly, she looked at the sign, then down at Lila, her lips pressed together. Then she dropped a $5 bill into the case and walked off. Nora nodded with a quiet thank you, though her voice was nearly gone now as the sun lowered and shadows stretched longer. Dev rose from his chair, his tea untouched. He crossed the street slowly, not wanting to startle anyone. When he got close enough to hear Nora's quiet humming as she soothed her daughter, he stopped just short of the sidewalk and watched. Unsure what to say, Nora noticed him, her eyes cautious, tired. She gave a small nod, half greeting, half warning. Dev raised a hand slightly, unsure himself. "She has a beautiful smile," he said, his voice gentle. Nora looked down at Lila and nodded again. "She's my heart," she replied, her voice soft but full of meaning. Dev wanted to say something more, something that might matter, but the words tangled up. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and slid a folded 20 into the case. "I'm Dev," he said, as if offering that was enough. Nora blinked, surprised by the money, maybe more by his tone. "Nora," she replied quietly. The name felt like a confession, like giving a piece of herself away. Dev smiled faintly, then looked down at Lila again. "She's strong," he said, "like her mom." Nora didn't respond right away, but her eyes softened just a little. A few moments passed in silence. Just the sounds of the city continuing on. Traffic moving, a dog barking, a group of kids laughing somewhere down the block. Dev took a step back, not wanting to intrude, but unable to leave completely. "I'll be around," he said, not sure if it made sense. But it was true. Nora nodded again. Not yes, not no, just a maybe that would be okay. As Dev walked away, he looked back once, saw Nora tuck the blanket tighter around her daughter, then raised the microphone again, her voice rising once more into the cool air, full of love, full of desperation, full of something that made Dev feel like this story wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, the sky hung heavy with gray clouds. As Nora set up her usual spot on Maple Street, her hand shook slightly as she opened the guitar case, laid out the worn cardboard sign, and gently unwrapped the blanket around her daughter. Layla blinked up at her with tired eyes, her breathing slow and shallow. "You ready, Mama?" she whispered. Nora smiled softly, brushing a lock of hair from Lila's forehead. "As ready as we need to be," she replied, lifting the microphone with care across the street. Dev stood inside the cafe, holding a paper cup of black coffee. He hadn't slept well. All night he had thought about Nora and Lila, about the way Nora's voice had cracked on the last note, and the way Layla had clutched her mother's hand like it was the only thing keeping her here. He wasn't sure why it affected him so deeply, but he knew the answer was buried somewhere he didn't like to visit. He took a sip, then another, his eyes never leaving the mother and daughter. The sounds of the cafe around him faded as a memory stirred inside his mind. Years ago, long before he ever came to Portland, Dev had sat in another hospital room beside a bed that held his younger brother, Arun, who had fought a silent battle with the same rare heart condition Lila now faced. Dev had been only 19, helpless and angry, watching the monitors beep until they didn't anymore. The pain had turned into silence. The silence had turned into distance, and Dev had left behind everything that reminded him of what he lost, including music, including people. Until yesterday, when a single song broke through it all and reminded him of who he once was. Nora strummed the first notes of a soft melody, her voice gentle and low. This morning her throat ached, but she sang anyway. She always did. Her eyes scanned the small crowd, people walking past, a few stopping briefly, most not. Her hope sat in the form of coins and crumpled bills tossed into the case, but even more in the eyes of the girl curled beside her feet. Leela coughed once, then again. Nora crouched down quickly, checking her forehead. "Just rest, baby," she whispered. "We'll go home soon." She didn't mention they might not have enough for another night at the motel. She didn't say anything about the medicine that was running low. She just kissed Leela's forehead and stood again. Lifting the mic, Dev stepped out of the cafe and crossed the street, his steps slow, cautious. He didn't want to frighten her or seem like someone expecting anything in return. He paused a few feet away as Nora finished her song, then gave a quiet clap, just loud enough for her to hear. Over the traffic, Nora glanced at him, surprised, but not unkind. "You came back," she said, her voice raspy from singing. Dev nodded, shifting his coffee cup between hands. "I meant to," he replied, then hesitated. "Do you have a minute?" Nora looked down at Lila, who had fallen asleep again, then back up at Dev. "A minute's all I've got," she said. They sat on the low edge of the planter beside her spot, Dev staring at the pavement, Nora watching him carefully. "You said yesterday your name was Dev," she said. "Why are you really here?" Dev exhaled, the question heavier than he expected. "Because," he began, then stopped. "Because I used to know someone like Leela." Nora's brows furrowed. "Your child?" she asked quietly. Dev shook his head. "My brother, Arun. He was 7 when they found out his heart was failing. My family didn't have much, but we tried everything." He paused, eyes distant. "I watched him fade away, and it broke something in me." Nora didn't say anything, just listened. The street noise continued around them, but in that moment, it felt like a hush had fallen over the city. Dev continued, his voice steady now. "I didn't know how to Deal with it, so I didn't. I left, shut people out. Left music behind, left everything. He looked up at Nora. Until yesterday. When you sang that lullaby, Nora's eyes softened. Her fingers tightening slightly around the mic. I used to be a music teacher, she said. Before all this, she nodded toward Lila. Now it's the only thing keeping us going. They sat in silence for a while. The quiet filled with the unspoken bond of shared pain. Dev glanced over at Layla, her tiny chest rising and falling beneath the thin blanket. She reminds me of him, he said softly. Not in looks, but in the way she holds on, like the world can't take her if she doesn't let go. Nora swallowed hard, her throat tight. That's exactly it, she said, her voice trembling. Every day feels like a cliff edge, and all I've got to hold her back is this. She lifted the mic slightly, then set it back down. Dev reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. He set it in the guitar case without a word. What's that? Nora asked, cautious. He met her eyes. Just something to make sure she's warm tonight. He said, no expectations, no strings. Nora stared at the envelope, unsure, but didn't remove it. Dev stood, brushing his coat down. I know what it feels like to be offered help and not know if you can trust it, he said. So you don't have to decide now. He reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out a folded note. But if you ever want to talk, or if she needs more than what you have, call me. He placed the note beside the envelope, nodded once, then walked away without waiting for a response. Nora watched him go, her thoughts racing. She glanced down at Lila, then at the note, then back at the street. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the corner of the envelope, but it stayed right where he had left it. Nora reached into the case, picked up the note, and unfolded it slowly. Written in neat handwriting were just 6 words. Please let me help you, Dev. She folded it again, tucking it inside her coat. Her fingers brushed over the envelope, but she left it there. For now she adjusted the microphone. Her eyes on Lila, her voice steady but soft, and began to sing once more, not because she had to, but because it was all she could do to keep the fear away. For a little while longer, the next morning, Maple Street was colder than usual. A thin layer of frost clung to the windows of parked cars. And Nora wrapped Leela in 2 blankets instead of 1. Her hands moved slowly, carefully, as if trying not to wake a sleeping dream. Leela coughed weakly, her small frame trembling with each breath. Nora kissed her forehead and whispered, "Hang in there, baby," before setting up her microphone again. Across the street, Jasmine Flores walked with her camera slung around her neck. She was a high school senior, usually filming street art and skate videos for her small YouTube channel. But today something pulled her down this block. She heard Nora's voice before she saw her, soft but strong, cutting through the air like it didn't care if no one was listening. Jasmine slowed, stepping behind a light post to get a better view. Nora stood in her usual spot, guitar case open, sign beside her feet. A few coins rattled inside. Jasmine watched as Nora sang a slow melody, her voice full of emotion, her eyes never leaving the sleeping child by her side. Jasmine's fingers tightened around her camera. She raised it slowly and pressed record back at her small apartment. Jasmine edited the footage quietly, her laptop humming beside her. She added simple text over the video that read, "A mother's song for her daughter's life," and hit upload. The video was less than 2 minutes long, but by the time Jasmine returned from her evening class, her notifications were on fire. Thousands of people were watching, sharing, and commenting. The video had spread across social media like wildfire. Comments poured in from around the world, people asking who Nora was, how they could help, saying how moved they were by the raw emotion in her voice, and the way she held her daughter close. Meanwhile, Nora had no idea any of this was happening. She sat in the small motel room, her back against the wall, her legs stretched beside Leela, who slept curled under a worn blanket. Nora counted the money from the day. It was barely enough for one more night. Her hands trembled as she placed a call to the motel office, asking for just one more day. Her voice cracked but steady. She didn't mention she might not be able to pay the next morning back at her apartment. Jasmine created a GoFund page with the little information she had. Just the video, a few lines about Nora and Lila, and a promise that every dollar would go to them if they could be found by morning. The page had raised over $15,000. Miles Cooper, a young local journalist with a passion for stories that mattered, saw the video on his feed just after breakfast. He clicked, watched, and felt the breath leave his lungs. Something about the way Nora sang, the way the little girl's hand clung to her mother's sleeve, it stayed with him. He called his editor within minutes. "I want to find them," he said. "I think people need to know their story." The editor agreed, and by noon, Miles was walking down Maple Street with a notebook in his coat pocket and a quiet urgency in his step. Nora was singing again, her voice worn from the cold, her fingers stiff around the microphone. Layla lay against her coat, eyes closed but peaceful. Miles approached slowly, not wanting to disturb the song. When Nora finished, he stepped closer and introduced himself. "I'm Miles," he said gently. "I'm a writer for the Portland Beacon." Nora blinked, confused. "A writer?" she echoed. "Why would a writer want to talk to me?" Miles knelt beside the guitar case, his eyes kind and clear. "Because your voice is changing lives and you don't even know it yet," he said, then explained about the video, the views, the fundraiser, and the people asking for her name. Nora listened in stunned silence, her hand gently stroking Lila's hair. She looked down at her daughter, then back at Miles. "People really saw us?" she asked, her voice no louder than a whisper. Miles nodded. "They did. And they're reaching out." Dev arrived a moment later, carrying a paper bag of warm food and 2 coffees. He paused when he saw Miles, then gave a small nod. "Looks like the world's catching up," he said to Nora, offering her a quiet smile. Nora looked between the 2 men, her heart racing. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I'm just a mom trying to save my kid." "And that," Miles said softly, "is exactly why your story matters." Within hours, the article was published with the headline, "The Mother, the Microphone, and the Song That Stopped the City." It included Nora's first name and a message from Jasmine linking to the fundraiser. Donations doubled within the hour, then tripled. Local news stations picked it up, then national ones. People sent food, blankets, letters, and even offers of help from doctors across the country. By evening, a representative from the Harmony Children's Foundation reached out to Miles. Their message was clear. They wanted to cover all of Lila's medical costs, but they also had one request. They wanted Nora to perform at their upcoming benefit concert. "Her story can help so many more," the message read, "and we believe she has the strength to share it." Nora stared at the email on Dev's phone, her hands shaking. "A concert," she whispered. "I haven't stood on a stage in years." Dev knelt beside her, placing his hand gently over hers. "You've already done the hardest thing," he said. "This is just the world listening now." Nora looked down at Layla, who had just opened her eyes, her tiny voice barely above a breath. "Are we okay, Mama?" she asked. Nora brushed a tear from her cheek, nodded, and whispered, "Yes, baby. We might be okay now." Outside, Maple Street buzzed with the same traffic, same footsteps, same people rushing past. But something had changed. A song had been heard, and the world was beginning to sing back. The air inside the theater buzzed with quiet excitement. Rows of chairs filled slowly as people from every corner of the city took their seats. Stage lights glowed a soft gold, casting long shadows behind the curtain. Backstage, Nora stood with her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her heart beating so fast she could barely breathe. Her dress was simple, her shoes worn, but in that moment she felt like she was standing on the edge of something much bigger than herself. Lila sat nearby in a folding chair, bundled in a fluffy jacket and holding a small bouquet of fake flowers someone had handed her earlier. Her cheeks were fuller now, her skin had more color. She waved at Nora with a sleepy smile. "You're gonna be amazing, Mama," she whispered. Nora smiled back, tears prickling her eyes. "I'm doing this for you, baby," she said. Her voice trembling. Dev stepped beside her, dressed in a clean jacket and jeans, holding 2 warm drinks. He handed her one and gave a quiet nod. "You ready?" he asked. Nora shook her head, then nodded, then laughed nervously. "No, but also yes," she replied. Dev smiled. "Just sing like you did on Maple Street." That's the voice the world fell in love with. A stagehand waved from the curtain, signaling that it was time. Nora's knees shook as she took a deep breath and stepped forward. The stage lights blinded her for a moment, but then she heard it, the gentle sound of applause, not loud or wild, but warm and steady. She blinked into the brightness and saw the crowd, saw Lila in the front row beside Dev. Both of them smiling stepped up to the microphone. Her fingers brushing over its surface, she looked down at the guitar slung across her shoulder, then up again at the crowd. "Good evening," she began, her voice soft. "I'm Nora, and a few weeks ago, I was just a mother singing on the sidewalk trying to save my daughter's life." She paused as murmurs ran through the audience. "But now I'm standing here because of all of you. Because you listened, because you cared." She adjusted the strap on her guitar and strummed the first chord, her voice rising slowly, like the sun after a long night. The song was new, written in the days after Leela's first treatments. It was called "Still Here," and every word was a piece of her heart. It told the story of holding on when the world pushes you down, of quiet love and small hopes, of songs sung with shaking hands and tired voices as she sang. The room fell silent. People leaned forward, eyes shining. The spotlight made her sweat. But her voice held strong, and when her fingers slipped on a chord, she kept going. Because this wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. Nora's eyes stayed on Lila, who mouthed the words along with her, her small face glowing. When the song ended, there was a long pause, and then the room erupted with applause, louder than anything Nora had ever heard. It washed over her like a wave, and she stepped back, blinking away tears. Dev met her as she came off stage, his expression proud and quiet. "You did it," he said. Nora nodded. Breathless, "We did it," she replied. Moments later, the foundation director approached her with a check and a handshake. "This," he said, "will cover everything: Leela's treatment, your housing, even a music scholarship. If she wants it one day." Nora stared at the paper in disbelief, her hands trembling as she accepted it. Back at the motel that night, Nora sat beside Lila, who was already asleep, her hand curled around her mother's wrist. The room was small and quiet, but it felt different now. It felt like a beginning instead of an ending. Nora picked up her phone and saw dozens of new messages, comments, news articles, invites from radio stations and talk shows. People asking to hear more of her music. A few weeks later, Nora moved into a small apartment with clean floors, working heat, and a window that looked out over a little park. Lila had a room of her own for the first time, decorated with butterfly stickers and stuffed animals from well-wishers. She was stronger now, able to walk longer, laugh louder, and even help Nora cook simple meals. Dev visited often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with music gear. He brought her a second-hand keyboard and a small microphone. "You need a way to record," he said. "People are asking for your songs." Together, they recorded an acoustic album, with all proceeds going to help other families in medical crisis. They called it Open Case, a nod to the guitar. Case that started everything that's past, and life became something steady. Not easy, but manageable. One bright spring morning, Nora stood at the edge of the park while Lila chased bubbles with 2 other children. Dev sat on a nearby bench, sketching ideas for a nonprofit that would support street musicians and single parents. Nora walked over and sat beside him. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not walking past that day." Dev looked up, his smile easy. "Thank you," he said, "for singing anyway." They sat there in silence for a while, letting the sounds of laughter and music fill the air. Later that evening, Nora and Lila returned to the old sidewalk on Maple Street. They placed a fresh flower on the corner where they once sat, not as a goodbye, but as a memory, a reminder of where hope first began. Nora took out her guitar and sang one song, just one. And as people stopped to listen, she smiled, knowing that this time they truly heard her.